Over the past 4 decades, Mr. Chairman, Munich has become synonymous with security. That's important because, as I said last night, without security, nothing is really possible. Not freedom, not prosperity, not the peace we cherish and crave. But for the Jewish people, 2 infamous things occurred in this city. In 1972, 11 of our Olympic athletes were massacred at the Munich airport. In many ways, this act of savagery heralded the rise of international terrorism, and we've all been battling it ever since. And 80 years ago, another event took place here with far-ranging consequences. A disastrous agreement was signed here that set the world on a course towards history's most horrific war. 2 decades after World War I, 2 decades after a war that claimed 16 million lives, the leaders who met in Munich chose to appease Hitler's regime rather than confront it. Those leaders were noble men. They thought they were fulfilling their highest responsibility to keep the peace. But the price of their action would soon become apparent. The concessions to Hitler only emboldened the Nazi regime and facilitated its conquest of Europe. Rather than choosing a path that might have prevented war, or at the very least limited its scope and its scale, those well-intentioned leaders made a wider war inevitable and far more costly. Sometime after the war, Roosevelt asked Churchill, how would he call this war? And he answered immediately, without hesitation, the unnecessary war. He said there was never a war more easy to stop. In the wake of the Munich Agreement, 60 million people would die in World War II, including a third of my own people, 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust by the Nazis and their collaborators. We will never forget, and we will never allow the rewriting of the historical truth. Lo nishkach, lo nislach, nilachem al ha'emet, zoi tzava'at hanispim. We will not forget, we will not forgive, we will always fight for the truth. Today we gather 2.5 years after another agreement was signed in another city in the heart of Europe. There too, noble men and women, high-minded leaders, hoping to avoid war, signed an agreement with a regime that brutalizes its own people and terrorizes its neighbors. Let me be clear. Iran is not Nazi Germany. There are many differences between the two. Well, for one advocated a master race, the other advocates a master faith. Jews in Iran are not sent to the gas chambers, although religious and ethnic minorities are denied basic freedoms. And there are obviously many other differences. But there are also some striking similarities. Iran openly declares its intention to annihilate Israel with its 6 million Jews. It makes absolutely no bones about it. Iran seeks to dominate our region, the Middle East, and seeks to dominate the world through aggression and terror. It's developing ballistic missiles to reach deep into Europe and to the United States as well. Henry Kissinger said that Iran must choose between being a country or a cause. Well, the regime in Iran has chosen to be a cause. The commander of the Revolutionary Guard, Ali Jafri, said, "We're on the path to the rule of Islam worldwide." That means right here, too. This is, in my judgment, the greatest threat to our world, not just to Israel, not just to our Arab neighbors, not just to Muslims far and wide, but to you as well. Because once armed with nuclear weapons, Iran's aggression will be unchecked, and it will encompass the entire world. Look at what they're doing now, before they have nuclear weapons. Imagine what they'll do later, if, God forbid, they'll have them. Just as was true 80 years ago, an agreement that was seen as appeasement has only emboldened the regime and brought war closer. The nuclear agreement with Iran has begun the countdown to an Iranian nuclear arsenal in little more than a decade. And the sanction relief that the deal provided has not moderated Iran. It's not made them more moderate internally, and it's not made them more moderate externally. In fact, it's unleashed a dangerous Iranian tiger in our region and beyond. Through its proxies, Shia militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Iran is devouring huge swaths of the Middle East. Now, there has been one positive consequence of Iran's growing aggression in the region. It's brought Arabs and Israelis closer together as never before. And in a paradoxical way, this may pave the way for a broader peace and ultimately also for a Palestinian-Israeli peace. This could happen, but it will not happen if Iran's aggression continues to grow. And nowhere are Iran's belligerent ambitions clearer than in Syria. There, Iran hopes to complete a contiguous empire, linking Tehran to Tartus, the Caspian to the Mediterranean. For some time, I've been warning about this development. I've made clear in word and deed that Israel has red lines it will enforce. Israel will continue to prevent Iran from establishing a permanent military presence in Syria. Israel will continue to act to prevent Iran from establishing another terror base from which to threaten Israel. But Iran continues to try to cross those red lines. Last week, its brazenness reached new heights, literally new heights. It sent a drone into Israeli territory, violating Israel's sovereignty, threatening our security. We destroyed that drone and the control center that operated it from Syria. And when our planes were fired upon, Israel destroyed Syrian anti-aircraft batteries. Israel will not allow Iran's regime to put a noose of terror around our neck. We will act without hesitation to defend ourselves. And we will act, if necessary, not just against Iran's proxies that are attacking us, but against Iran itself. Later today, you will hear from Mr. Zarif. He's the smooth-talking mouthpiece of Iran's regime. I give Mr. Zarif credit. He lies with eloquence. Last year at this conference, Zarif said that, I'm quoting, extremism is driven by lack of hope and respect. Well, if that's true, why does the Iranian regime deny its people hope and respect by jailing journalists and activists? Zarif said it was erroneous to label Iran radical. If that's true, what do you call a regime that hangs gays from cranes in town squares? Zarif said that conflicts in Syria and Yemen do not have military solution. If that's true, why does Iran send fighters and arms to fuel violence precisely in those places? No doubt Mr. Zarif will brazenly deny Iran's nefarious involvement in Syria. Iran also denies that it committed an act of aggression against Israel last week, that it sent a drone into our airspace to threaten our people. Well, here's a piece of that Iranian drone, or what's left of it after we shot it down. I brought it here so you can see it for yourself. Mr. Zarif, Do you recognize this? You should. It's yours. You can take back with you a message to the tyrants of Tehran. Do not test Israel's resolve. And I have a message for everyone gathered here today, too. I want you to support the people of Iran. I want you to support those in the region who want peace by confronting an Iranian regime that threatens peace. I've been speaking to the people of Iran with video messages. The response is amazing. I saw this before the recent demonstrations. I asked my intelligence people to explain to me how it is that we were getting names of people supporting what I said from Iran, risking their lives, their families. I said something is happening there. Those people want freedom. They want a different life. They want economic prosperity. They want peace. They don't want this far-flung Iranian aggression. And I've explained we have no quarrel with the people of Iran, only with the regime that torments them. And I take this opportunity to send our condolences to the families of the 66 Iranian civilians shot down or that lost their lives in the plane accident today. We have no quarrel with the people of Iran, but we are absolutely resolute in our determination to stop and roll back the aggression of Iran's regime. Let us pledge today, ladies and gentlemen, here in Munich, not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Appeasement never works. The hour to prevent war is getting late, but it is not too late. I'm convinced that one day this regime will fall. And when it does, the great peace between the ancient Jewish people and the ancient Persian people will flourish once again. When that happens, the people of Iran will breathe free, and the people in the region and throughout the world will breathe a sigh of relief. But today, we must speak clearly, we must act boldly. We can stop this dangerous regime. We can roll back its aggression, and by doing so, create a more peaceful, a more prosperous, and a more secure world for our region and for our future. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for your statement. We have time for a few questions, and we collected a couple of questions from the audience, and I'll read the first question to you. It actually follows exactly what you just referred to. How real is the danger of full-scale military escalation in the region following recent incidents in and around Syria? Question mark.
It's up to Iran. Iran has been trying to change the ground rules, Mr. Chairman. What has happened in the region is that, if I can show this, can you see this? Can you somehow zero in on this and see it? No?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is a brief description of the Middle East as it looks right now. I call it the red and the black, like the French novel by Stendhal. Well, the red is ISIS, the radical Sunnis. The black is Iran and its offshoots, the radical Shiites. As the red compresses, and it will be wiped out very soon from the map of the Middle East, Iran is moving in. We have fought both types of militant Islam. Israel contributed mightily to the the battle against ISIS by giving unmatched military intelligence that has prevented dozens of terrorist attacks in dozens of countries. And we're absolutely determined to prevent Iran from creating a new base in the West. I call it ISIS West. Obviously, Egypt is fighting it as well, to prevent ISIS from shifting its base from Iraq and Syria into the Sinai or into Somalia, into Africa and other places. This is one battle that we are fighting successfully. The unfortunate thing is that as ISIS compresses and Iran moves in, it's trying to establish this continuous empire surrounding the Middle East from the south in Yemen, but also trying to create a land bridge: Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza. This is obviously a very dangerous development for our region. It is creating this new realignment of Israel and Arab states precisely because we all recognize, they recognize, that Israel is no longer their enemy, but their indispensable ally in fighting these twin forms of militant Islam that threaten them as much as they threaten us. Specifically, what Iran is doing now is this, and this is recently, this is just in the aftermath of the defeat of ISIS, the territorial defeat of ISIS in Syria and Iraq. Iran is trying to colonize Syria. It is trying to move military bases into Syria, to move its army 1,500 kilometers from Iran to Israel's backyard. It wants to establish naval bases in the Mediterranean. Can you imagine Iranian submarines next to the Sixth Fleet or off the coast of Haifa? It wants to establish Shiite militia bases, bring roughly 100,000 Shiite fighters into Syria, and it wants to establish air bases and bring aircraft, fighter aircraft, helicopters, and the like, right to our vicinity with the express goal of attacking us. So Iran is changing the ground rules in Syria. I've said we will not allow them to do that. And I've backed our words with actions. So far, that has not progressed. And Mr. Assad understands that if he invites Iran in, then obviously he is challenging us to a different position than the one we've had. During the 6 years of the internal conflict in Syria, we've not involved ourselves at all in that conflict, except for helping with humanitarian aid, wounded civilians, wounded children, women. We've helped thousands of them in Israeli hospitals. But we've not entered into any conflict there except preventing Iranian transport of dangerous weapons to Hezbollah through Syrian territory. If Mr. Assad invites Iran in militarily, that changes our position. So that's up to Iran and to Mr. Assad. Then the second thing that Iran is trying to do is to change the ground rules inside Lebanon. What it wants to do there is to add to Hezbollah's armory, in addition to 130,000 statistical rockets, to add precision-guided munitions, which change the balance of power by having game-changing weapons that could hit any spot in Israel with an accuracy of 10 meters. That's very, very dangerous for a small country like Israel. So we're committed to prevent that too. In other words, what is changing is Iran's status quo. Iran is trying to change the status quo, both in Lebanon and in Syria. If they don't change the status quo, then I think peace will be preserved, or at least non-belligerence will be preserved. If they do change the status quo, well, I follow a rule set by the early Zionists who saw the problem of anti-Semitism brewing in Europe, and that's why they wanted to establish a Jewish state. They said, nip bad things in the bud. Stop them before they get big. That's basically what our policy is. It's up to Iran.
Prime Minister, we have time for maybe two more questions. The next one is actually a direct follow-on to what you have just said. I'll read the question. What is the view of the Israeli government on the future of the JCPOA? Those of you who are not familiar with the technical talk, this is the so-called Iranian nuclear deal. And more specifically, why would the security of Israel be more secure without the JCPOA than with the JCPOA? Question mark.
I don't particularly care about the agreement, keeping it or nixing it, that is, fixing it or nixing it. I have one goal in mind: to prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons. Such a radical regime would be unrecognizable in its aggression once it has atomic bombs and the means to deliver them. So you have to fix it. Whether you can do it within the context of the deal, fine. If you can't, you should scrap it. But here's what's wrong with what Iran is doing. First, I mean, to have nuclear weapons, you need three things. You need a gun, you need a bullet, and you need gunpowder. The gun are the ballistic missiles. They're developing them outside the deal in contravention of UN Security Council resolutions. They should be stopped. They should be slammed with the toughest crippling sanctions to prevent them from continuing the development of these weapons, of these guns, these delivery systems. The second thing is a weapon, the casing of the bullet, if you will. They may very well be hiding it. I don't think it's covered effectively because there are no inspections. There are inspections in the deal, but you cannot inspect effectively military sites. So where do you think Iran is going to hide anything they're doing in this realm or any other realm? You don't go into military sites, so you can expect them to put things in military sites. The way they get around it is that the IAEA is not asked to go into military sites, but if you don't go there and inspect them, you know what's going to happen there. So I think you have to change the inspection regime. The third thing is the most important one, and it is this. Within less than a decade, Iran effectively gets on the highway of producing massive enrichment of uranium. That's the gunpowder. That's the toughest thing to make in a nuclear weapon. It is the most difficult thing to manufacture. It requires big plants. It requires a lot of precision engineering. It's hard to do. Iran has been given, after the calendar passes, free rein to effectively enrich uranium without limitation and to do research that allows them to have what they say they'll have, 200,000 centrifuges, some of them 40 times more advanced than the current generation of centrifuges. This would allow them to produce a lot of fissile cores necessary for the production of that bullet, that nuclear bullet. And so the combination of ballistic missiles, lack of inspections, and free enrichment down the line, I think is very dangerous. I think rather than just have Iran's ability to rescind the limitations on its nuclear agreement happen by a change in the calendar, it should happen by a change in Iran's behavior. This is the main thing. I don't think you should have an automatic sunset clause in this deal. I think it should be linked to a change in Iran's behavior, a ceasing of its aggression that is going through the window in the region. Can that be done by Iranian consent? I doubt it. But I, for one, do not think that if these conditions are put forward, that Iran will break away to the bomb. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that would be very foolish on their part to do so because they have now enough, they have only enough enriched material for one device. If they wait 10 years, which is the whole problem with the deal, they'll have enough material for 100 devices or 200 for a whole arsenal of nuclear weapons, and they can just break into it in a very short time. I think they'll be very careful. If I have to guess what they'll do, if the deal is not reapproved in Washington, I think they'll do nothing. And countries, of course, will have to choose what they do, should this be the case. Iran's economy isn't that big. It's a little bigger than the Israeli economy. They have 80 million people. We have a little more than 8. But our economies are almost the same size. So I guess people will have to choose whether they want to go with the Iranian economy or with the larger economy called the American economy. I think I think it's time to stop them now. They're aggressive, they're developing ballistic missiles, they're not inspecting, and they're going to have a free highway to massive enrichment. This has to be changed. If you do it within the agreement, fine. If you can't do it without the agreement, scrap it. But it's better to stop it now.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I wish we had more time, because if we did, I would invite John Kerry as one of the architects of this deal to join us on stage. But we're running out of time. I have a third question, which I'd like to read to you. It's a very simple question.
Not that John and I never had the opportunity to talk about this.
Third question is, and I'm afraid it's the last one, is there a future for the two-state solution or not? Question mark.
Here's my position. I think the Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves, except the powers to threaten us. So it means that they'll have control over their lives, but we will have control over security in any peace or agreement, should there be one. Now, the American governments have steadily tried to facilitate such an agreement. You mentioned John Kerry, he did this. President Clinton, he did this. President Obama and John Kerry did this before. President Clinton did that before. You remember, of course, the Carter administration's role in Camp David. First of all, I think no one can facilitate it other than the United States. I think we should dispose of any possibility there. And always people will say, but the U.S. is tilting this way or tilting that way. Anyone can make that argument. I never did. I never chose not to engage with our American partners for that kind of an excuse. I think you have to actually deal with it in a serious way and see if there are proposals that are put forward by the United States government that could help launch negotiations. The Trump administration has been working on their plan for the last year. I don't know if they're going to put it forward in the next weeks or months. They haven't said that they will, but they haven't said that they won't. They say they're working on it and they're committed to putting it forward. I think the very least we should do is give it a shot. Let's look at it. Let's not throw it out the window before we even saw it. And I think this is the unfortunate and I think and disappointing position of President Abbas. I think we should give it a chance, see if we can enter into discussions based on this, because I think that we owe our people this effort. I myself have dealt with this over the years very seriously, very conscientiously, with great detail, and sometimes with considerable ingenuity. But I think we owe it to our people to give this a chance. The other thing that I would say is that the fact that we have this newfound relationship with the Arab countries, something that, Mr. Chairman, I would not have imagined in my lifetime. This is not what they call a spin. This is real. It's deep. It's broad. It doesn't necessarily cross the threshold of a formal peace, and I doubt that would happen until we get some formal progress with the Palestinians. So the two are linked. But I think that the opportunity to bootstrap an agreement, having progress with the Arab countries in certain areas, having progress with the Palestinians in certain areas, and just keep doing this, I think this is more promising because of the Arab component, because of the strategic realignment that is taking place due to the causes that I've just described here. There is something different happening, and I think we should give this a chance. So the response to your question is, I don't categorize the agreement. Some will say it's less than a state. It is a state because I want security to be continuously held in Israel's hands, and I'll tell you why. The Middle East is littered with failed states, and you see that everywhere that you have the main security authority removed, what you have is the flow of militant Islam, either ISIS or Iran or Hamas, it's the same. And we don't want that. We did this. We went out of Gaza, we got Iran through Hamas. We went out of Lebanon. We got Iran through Hezbollah. So we certainly are not going to do that a third time. But it is possible to have this peace, which allows Israel to maintain security and allows the Palestinians to govern themselves. And I think that we should let the Americans put forward their proposal. If they don't, let's talk about other paths, preferably direct ones. But I think we should give this a chance.